Rob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Good to be here. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Rob, for people who don't know who you are, could you give us a bit of an introduction, please?
Sure. Yeah. I'm one of the co-founders at Cork Protocol. And just a little bit quick background to how I got to what I'm doing now. I started off my sort of entrepreneurial journey in agtech. So I was building a company within satellite data and AI. So that was around almost 10 years ago. And I built that up over around 5.5 years. And then we did a small IPO. And then I left that company to pursue another project called Toucan that is building uh, tokenized markets for carbon assets. So I've been working a bit with carbon assets at my first company, Builtus, and I wanted to do something in like Web3, so I became part of the founding team at Toucan, and we launched that, and that initially went like incredibly well. We had 100 million of TBL and 4 billion of volume in our markets. We actually had the majority of all the volume in the carbon market for like 2 years. So
Nice.
it was really quite successful. But then this whole carbon market imploded. I eventually ended up leaving that, and then was looking at different things to do. And I at Toucan been working a lot on the sort of market structure, in particular, looking at sort of we were building sort of structured products for carbon assets, and so I was quite familiar with that space, and actually I was kind of gravitating towards that area, and I was looking at that from like a Web3 perspective. Initially at mortgage-backed securities, but then I one area that I sort of was like discovering more and more was missing as I was doing a lot of research in terms of in particular like yield rehypothecation was like risk management. So I ended up being part of the like basically starting Cork to help build out the risk management layer for crypto. And yeah, so we launched that around 2 months ago. We have now close to 20 million TBL, but it's yeah kind of scaling from there.
Sounds cool. Very entrepreneurial journey over the last few years. Was that always the plan?
Not really. I mean, I started off going to uni, but I don't really, I'm not such a huge fan of lectures, so I kind of didn't really like it too much. I was in law school actually. I was going to switch to
Okay.
engineering, but yeah, I just kind of got pulled into like building stuff because that was much more interesting to me, and it started off more sort of like a side project. My first company was a side project whilst I was studying,
Okay.
but then it just kind of took more and more. My attention was the only thing that was really interesting me at the time, and so I just decided to drop out and pursue that. So it wasn't really planned, but I think it suits me and my personality quite well. So when I sort of discovered that, I just kind of kept going.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Going straight from university to then running your own companies, you're definitely thrown in at the deep end with
Yeah,
that.
very
That's like
much. It
sink
was
or swim, right?
yeah. I would say the first few years were, I would say, quite Like, it was super exciting, and like I was working like a bunch, and we were making a lot of progress. But I would say the initial period when kind of you're kind of coming out of university, and then you initially like thrown into this role of like you're managing a team, you're like raising money, like managing all the like counting, all these things. Like it was a lot of things to figure out. So definitely was thrown into the deep end, but in the end, like I think those first few years, like I learned a huge amount, and then like from there, like now sort of being in my third startup, it's yeah, no, it's I'm happy I have those lessons in the bag.
Yeah, for sure. And is there a particular role that you tend to gravitate towards in those startups? Like, are you more on the idea side? Are you on the operations side? Would you be on the tech side? Like, could you talk us through like what kind of role you tend to fit into?
It's been varying a bit. Like I find um, it depends a little bit on sort of the needs of the business and also the team that's around. I would say for my last two startups, I've been more gravitating towards the product and in particular like the sort of market design and tokenomics and all these things. So right now I'm the co-CEO, but I'm more responsible for the product side in terms of like how all the mechanisms work, like how the product is shaped and so forth. Um, I mean, I think that suits me more because it's more yeah, it's a lot of kind of thinking through designs and like working with a team to build those things. I find that very rewarding to actually build a product and create it. It's very much a creative process, and yeah, so I think that probably is the area where I'm like strongest.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Were there any particular challenges that really surprised you throughout that entrepreneurial journey you just weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one of the areas which I find like eh, over time I've like started to appreciate more and more, which I think is one of the most important pieces, which is to like build the right team. Like to be honest, I think that's something which in my first company I did a lot of mistakes in terms of hiring, and it's not to say that not making mistakes today in terms of that it's like you're never gonna have like a flawless track record because you have imperfect information when you bring someone on, but I do think how you handle that, both in terms of spending enough time on key hires in terms of like the actual process and making sure that like, how you're running through that due diligence from different perspectives, as well as if things go wrong to quickly take that corrective action. I think that's you have to be I think both being diligent in terms of hiring, but also being quick to respond when you make mistakes in terms of hiring, and kind of yeah, I think there it also relates a lot to like culture and I think it's it's critically important, especially with startup, the initial hires you make, and I think the culture that those hires set is has a very like profound impact on the organization in terms of how it performs, how it behaves, and also to be honest, the joy of working there. Because in the end, like I'm spending vast majority of my free time working, and it's a lot more rewarding to do so with people that you actually like working with, that you like deeply respect, and that are like sort of leveling the team up. And so I think that's been one thing which I found like I didn't think that that would be such a big piece of it because in the end I think if you have a like as a startup you have to you have a thesis and you're kind of building a product and you're trying different things out and you oftentimes the initial idea is not the one that sticks and so you kind of are in a position where you usually have to be very adaptive to the market response and what the market is telling you, and I think to be able to do that well I think you need a team that can sort of keep executing and keep sort of iterating. And you need to be pretty tight and you need to be willing to make those changes because it's pretty difficult to pivot, like especially when let's say you've spent half a year building like one version of a product and then you find out that that's not really what the market wants and you have to like pivot. Then it's sort of this sort of sunken cost fallacy is one that's difficult to deal with because it's oftentimes like you have a lot of things invested in that product. You have a lot of like both emotionally and also like it's like actual money and your customers and everything. So being able to be like agile there and having the right team that can kind of follow you along that journey is really important.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Obviously, that's fairly close to my heart, being in recruitment, right? Helping founders build teams, and yeah, I think it's super important. Like, be quite. I always say, like, be quite slow to hire, but quick to then make the decision on whether or not someone is going to be going to stay around like, long term. Um, when I say slow, I don't mean months, but actually taking the time to really understand like who do you want in a team, what type of person, what type of personalities, what type of background, what type of experience they need to bring, um, and then through the interview process, like really make sure that you're doing your due diligence to actually make sure that those people are going to be the right fit. Because you're right, like the first 5, 10 hires in a startup make or break it really. regardless of what you're building. I think if you hire good people who can solve problems, they can pivot into anything, attack a new problem, whatever it might be. But I think if you hire wrong, it can really stunt the growth and the development of the startup, right? So yeah, I think you're completely right on that.
Yeah,
I guess it's a challenge. You have to almost learn the hard way to some degree. Um, yeah, maybe you
I
just
think
have to get
it's
thrown in, right? And just
exactly. I think it's sort of you have to actually experience the mistake. I think the like to really take it very seriously. I think it's like it's one thing to hear it. Like it's not that when I started off building my first company that was like, oh, the hiring was important. Like people kept telling me hiring was important, but I think it's once you really experience the problem of doing it wrong that you start to really prioritize doing it right. Because the cost of doing it wrong, I think that's the piece that's um, I think you have to really understand. Like if you have the wrong hire, you both are stopping yourself from getting the right person on board, but also it's really like a massive drag in terms, like both psychologically for everyone involved, because oftentimes you will have like conflicts, and those conflicts will be massive distractions in terms of your ability to focus. And then in the end, it becomes a massive sort of demotivating factor for everyone in the team when you have like different types of conflicts and you have some people not performing well, and then it makes that the people who are performing well, it's also a demotivator for them because then they have to carry all the weights, and that then it starts feeling unfair, and then you kind of get like a bad dynamic and everything. So I think it sort of torpedoes the project in a sense when you have like bad hires that especially that stick around for a while. It's always going to suck to like make the cut, but you know you just have to do it. And um, I, I increasingly think that the pace at which you move forward is sort of a function partially of sort of avoiding mistakes. And it's not to say that you shouldn't take risks and make mistakes. It's you have to some extent make mistakes. But I think if you can avoid making these types of mistakes, it saves you a lot of pain. And I think that's where investing in a proper recruiting process is quite helpful because it really is like sure it's a headache to do a long recruitment process, and you're eager to get people in because you have things to do and you need to move forward, but it's just like risk reward because if you're it's a big risk whenever you're taking someone on, and because it can go quite wrong, and so you sort of want to minimize that risk to the extent possible. And I think it's you save a lot of time up front by just being more thorough in the screening than getting the wrong hire and then having to repeat the process.
definitely, and also it costs as a young startup, it costs a lot of money as well, right? Cost of a bad hire is can be quite substantial depending on the role that person's in. And I definitely think there's enough free advice out there for creating these types of interview processes. I know a lot of people don't like to talk to recruiters too much these days because I think the recruitment industry in general has given itself a fairly bad reputation uh, overall. But there are still some really, really good recruiters out there who'll give all this advice for free. If you're a young if you're a new founder and you're reaching out to various different recruitment companies that have got good reputations in the industry that you're in, and you're asking them this advice, like all of them will give you free advice on saying, well, this is how you should set your interview process up. This is how you could choose people. This is how you should go and evaluate that. These are some questions you can ask. This is what our last 20 clients have done when it comes to hiring and that kind of thing. So, yeah, my advice would be if you're new to it, just go and chat to as many people who's gone through that process as you can. Um, yeah, and you'll hopefully, fingers crossed, not always, but it will help you try and avoid some of those mistakes. Um, but this is probably going to be quite a vague question or one difficult to answer. Could you give us a bit of a crash course on being a founder in Web3? Like what components you need in place, what do you need to consider before kicking off projects? Um, I guess fairly high level, otherwise we could probably be here for days talking about it. But yeah, could you give us a bit of a crash course?
I mean, I think to start, I think you need kind of some sort of like general problem area that you want to build a solution for, that you've sort of identified. Ideally, something which is like somehow novel and like has a unique edge to things. Because I think doing it's in a sense it's tricky to find something that's like truly unique because there's a lot of people building and there's a lot of things that kind of look similar. But I think if you do have something that's more novel, I think there's a few benefits. Both that you have a competitive advantage because you're kind of doing something unique, and then also there's the piece that it's also easier to attract capital because you have this competitive advantage, and it's also easier to like attract people, like good people, to join you. Um, and so I think there's like one aspect to it, which is the sort of idea, but um, I'd say the bigger part is you need to then initially find like the right sort of people to build that. So the initial like co-founders usually need to be in place, and then um, either you're sort of bootstrapping some initial like building some initial MVP or so forth, just with your own like funds and your own time, or you raise some sort of like initial like pre-seed money to help do that. Usually you start off like building a little bit, and then you raise some pre-seed money to like once you have like a few things to show, to like build out the product fully and like launch it. I would say that's the usual process. So in order to do so, you need to um, have some skills in terms of fundraising. I think fundraising, like it's not that you have to fundraise. Like there's definitely ways to build companies without fundraising, but I would say most startups end up, doing some initial fundraising to get the product out. Um, unless you're sitting on like massive bags, you can just like fund it yourself. But like I would say for most people, especially like first time founders, it's like you usually need to raise some money. And to do that, I mean, I think it's um, like you need to build some sort of like usually like an investor deck or like sort of presentation that kind of goes through like, like describing the problem, the solution you have, like the market you're tackling, like your competitive advantage in terms of tackling that market, and the team that's kind of building that out. I think basically it's like pitching the team, the vision, and the direction you want to go. And usually you do like some sort of investor deck or some investor memo or something that helps communicate that, and then you just have to like talk to a fair bit of like usually a crypto focused VCs or crypto focused angels to do that. But yeah, and then I mean to actually get the product going and started, I think in the initial phase it's really important to actually validate the market that you're tackling. So I think oftentimes what investors want to see is that like you're able to find people on the other side that are interested in this product. Because the thing you want to avoid is basically that you spend a bunch of money to build a product that the market doesn't actually need or doesn't want. And so the biggest risk is really that you do that. And I think that's also why like probably most startups fail is that the product they're building actually isn't really needed. And so to minimize the risk of that happening, having some early like mock-up or some early like way of communicating what you're building and seeing how people respond to that. And this is again where most likely the initial mock-up or initial idea is like it's pretty often that you don't actually get a good response from that. And I think there's a bit of like a skill in terms of understanding you know what's good and not. And like I think the mistake when people go through is that they say, oh, it's just because the mock-up isn't like good enough, like it's missing this feature, and if we had those things, then people would like want it. But in general, if you have something that's directionally very interesting to people, and that there's a big need there, like they're going to see past that and be like, okay, we want this, we're interested to talk to you, like we're interested to like explore this further. And so if you're not getting those types of responses, like if no one's interested in what you're doing, I think that's like a good sign that you should not do it. Because in the end, like you don't want to just build a startup for the sake of building a startup. It's just like it's not such a like. I think it's a lot more fun to do it when things are going well and when you're doing something that actually like works out, because the process of like building something up and then like it not working out and then having to like wind it down is uh, you know I can't
Not
recommend
great.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the non-glamorous side of being a founder, right? That people don't see or don't hear about that often.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I would say it's for most people. I would say it's probably like pretty bad like risk reward to be a founder because in a sense you have like there's some chance that you're building something that works out, and there's like a potential very high upside in that scenario. I'd say the benefit is that in the process of doing so, even if it doesn't work out, I think you learn a lot by being a founder because you have to get thrown into all these different areas where you have to like figure things out. So I think it sort of broadens your skill sets quite meaningfully. Um, but I think in terms of like initial maybe like initially you're probably quite poorly compensated. You have to work quite a lot, and you also face like there's especially in crypto there's like personal risk in terms of being a founder, like because the sort of regulatory legal side is a bit of a gray zone, and so even if you're doing things like in the best way possible, you could personally get like you know tied up in like lawsuits and things like this that you have to like potentially personally deal with, and you could have personal liability from that, and so it's not it's in particular crypto it's not a game without any risk, and yeah, I think it's not necessarily for everyone. I think it depends on the stage you are in your life and kind of what you're looking for. Like if you're looking for like a stable source of income that's not going to be like kind of where you're going to have a great work-life balance, this is just not it. Like this is like if you are hungry to like really work a lot and grind and are excited about building stuff and like you really want to build, I think it's probably the best role you can be in. But that's I think that's the type of personality that I think thrives in this type of role because in particular in crypto, I think it's also a really big problem with like founder burnout. There's a lot of founders that kind of go on this journey, and then after 1 or 2 years, they just like they get burned out, and because it is it's a very challenging environment because there's like so many things going on. There's so many risks. Things move so fast. There's like so much work. Like you're getting pinged left and right from all these different apps, and like it can be quite stressful. So I think yeah, I think there's certain people it's a great fit for, but I think you have to really kind of look inwards and see if this is like for you if you're interested in doing this journey.
Yeah, you're right. I guess more. Well, I can probably safely say that more people make it, if you can say that, as being employed at like other businesses and that kind of stuff,
Totally.
than they do for being a founder. Right? I can imagine you can have a very very if you get to certain positions, you work in certain roles in larger businesses and stuff, you can have very stable, successful, lifelong careers and retire with, decent cash in the bank and live a happy life. Whereas as a founder, I guess uh, you're trying over and over again to make companies work, and if you're lucky, you hit one that does really really well, and then you have a successful exit eventually, or you have a super successful business. But it's yeah, the exception and not the norm, I think. But you really have to enjoy the journey. You don't do it for the end result, right? You're doing it for the journey because you love doing what you're doing, and you've fallen in love with that particular problem,
Yeah.
and you tried tons of different solutions to solve that particular problem, right? Like that's why you do it. I think if you're in it just to make cash, exit, and then move on to the next thing, make cash, exit, you probably get burnt out fairly quickly because you're not really uh, that into the idea, I guess, or like that into to solving that particular problem. Maybe I'm sure there's exceptions
Yeah.
to that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I kind of view it.
I agree. And like for me personally, like I enjoy the process of like building these startups. Like I find the sort of stressful nature of it is something that like works well for me because like I kind of like thrive in that sort of stressful chaos. Like for me, it's like I look forward to that. When I have that absence of that, I sort of miss it. And so like for me personally, it works. But I totally agree. Like I think if you're looking to make, especially in crypto, like if you join a company that's like raised their Series A and you get like a decent token allocation and then the ATG and like there's the number of people that make like a good amount of like wealth doing that is much higher than like people founding startups, I would say. But yeah, like if the people that are becoming billionaires, like they're mostly all founders, and so it's very binary. It's like I think it's yeah, like you said, it's like a small probability of success, but the potential outcome there is like much higher. So I think it just depends on like what you're looking for. But I think if you enjoy actually doing the work, and you enjoy sort of the whole process of it, then it's not really coming at a cost. It's like sure you have all this risk and so forth, but it's like it can be highly rewarding. Like if you're the type of person that enjoys that, and I think it can also set you up well, like in terms of like future career, because you end up having to do a lot of things and learning a lot of things. And so I think like the skills that you build and the connections you build and so forth can be quite valuable. Like there's a lot of people who start up as founders and then maybe take like an executive role at some like larger company later, and sort of that's how they eventually end up making their money. So that's also not a bad like doesn't always have to work out.
Do you think now you've founded three startups, you've made yourself almost unemployable? Like going back to looking at someone else's vision, implementing someone else's plan, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I think, like for example, my last startup, um, like there, it was sort of I technically joined the initial founding team there, so it wasn't like, and then there I was the CEO, so it was more like implementing the person I was initially starting with. But I was part of the founding team, like a say in terms of the strategy and direction, but um, it was still more like helping make that vision come to life. So I think I, it's not that I have to be in this role, but um, yeah, I think I need. I think it's helpful for me to have like a say in terms of how things are kind of done because I usually have an opinion. So I think that's uh, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be unemployable, but I would definitely want to work under someone where like I need to respect them and where I do have some say in terms of like my work. Like I think when I go into work, like I take a lot of accountability, and I think for a person like that, it's hard to just like not have any say in terms of how things are done. Like yeah, but to be done at the same time, I could see myself having a normal job at some point in the future, but we'll see.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just keep founding companies.
Yeah, nice, nice. And you spoke about it a little bit there about how there are some differences being in crypto compared to being in a more traditional um, tech companies and things. Is there anything that you really think people should know about the blockchain industry before joining it?
I think it's very fast paced. So I think tech in general is relatively fast paced, and there's certain pockets of tech that are very fast paced. I'd say like I have like some friends who are working in like the AI space, and I'd say there's like more similarities in terms of like the AI space in crypto than I would say if you're doing like a standard enterprise SaaS company in crypto. Because crypto is it's really moving very very quickly, and you have to be moving at that pace. And I think that manifests itself in terms of, for example, when you're doing some sort of deal or something, like it's just you're messaging really quickly between each other, you're closing things very quickly, and you have to stay on top of all these different things happening so fast. And like I think that's how that manifests itself is that you know like if you look at any like most people who work in crypto, like their Telegram will just be like it's just a
Wild.
mess. Like it's like so
Yeah.
many like different like groups and messages and constantly things to stay on top of. And then on top of that, you have like Slack, and then you have your email, stuff to share your Discord. So it's a lot of it can feel like on the inside it just feels like kind of chaos to some extent. But when you zoom out and you actually look at the progress that's being made, like in like a year, like a year in crypto feels like several years in like non-crypto kind of it just you're moving so quickly that you do end up making a lot of progress, which is exciting. But I think that's also where like this potentially comes at a cost. Like it ends up being that you spend a lot of time glued to a screen, and you oftentimes like the hours tend to be pretty long, and people tend to like outside of their normal working hours, are still like responding to messages, like the weekends and so forth. So yeah, it's like the work-life balance, I would say, tends to be maybe a little bit worse in crypto than I would say in other industries for that reason. But at the same time, you have perhaps more flexibility. Like crypto tends to be like remote first, and like crypto companies are like distributed, and all the communications is async, and so um, that feeds into this sort of communications burden. But it also means that you can, like a year ago or so, I was like 2 months in Australia working, and it was fine. Like it was not a problem.
Yeah.
Like you can just do that. Like people tend to like shift around and move around. I think that's for some people is great, but it's not for everyone.
Yeah, it's good to understand. So I remember so I've been recruiting into Web3 now for maybe 4 years, 4.5 years, something like that. And I remember when I made the switch across, and I was used to very, I say traditional recruitment, but just yeah, in the non crypto world, and that was tons of meetings. There was a lot of face to face stuff. There was also a lot of calls, a lot of email recruitment. There's a lot of cold calls and just ringing people's mobiles and that kind of stuff. You come across into crypto, blockchain and stuff, and it's the communication style switches, and it does take a little while to get used to that. So you're on Telegram, you're on Discord, you're on Twitter. Everything is async. People's mobile numbers aren't freely there. They don't have a work phone at a desk that you can just call through to their work line that we used to do, obviously in like Web2 recruitment and stuff. So even from, and I'm not necessarily working in it on a particular product, but even the communication style from someone who is a service to the industry, even that has to change, and you have to get used to that. And it is something that takes a little bit of getting used to. Um, and again, yeah, my Telegram again equally is hectic. I think every day you wake up to 80, 90 unread messages and stuff, and yeah, it gets quite crazy at times. So yeah, you're right. It's definitely something you need to be aware of before joining the industry.
I think you adapt to it and you kind of get used to it, and sort of I think it's become like normalized in the space. But I think for someone that's like not used to it, I can imagine it being. And for me personally, when I first started, I was just like, how do I manage this? I think you need to have some discipline in terms of, in particular, like notification management is I think very important. I think because there's so much work and so much stuff going on, it's like you need to find space to like unwind and disconnect from all of that. And I think it's very difficult when you're like everyone's working across different time zones and they're messaging you like all the time. Like if you don't turn off all the notifications and find ways to like escape all that, it's like you're gonna be bothered and think about work all the time. And I think that's like not viable long term.
Yeah, I think you're right. For me, it's I've become obsessed with paddle recently. Padel.
Oh,
I'm not sure if you
nice.
played.
Yeah, it plays well.
But yeah, that is now my new personality pretty much, and I do that like 4 times a week. So that's like the
Oh,
switch off point in the morning. So I live in Southeast Asia, and a lot of people I speak to are either in like the US or in Europe. Um, so actually, I have a slot in the morning that's like a couple of hours. That's just no one, either people aren't awake yet, or they're not talking to me or messaging. So it's that kind of switch off time that luckily I have that kind of hourly couple of hour window. But I think yeah, turning the phone off and getting away from it, uh, easier said than done when you've got loads of stuff to do. But I think it's definitely important to do that.
yeah.
So say if someone is looking to break into blockchain, get their first role in the industry, they don't want to be a founder, they're looking for an opportunity to help projects. Is there almost like a step by step guide you could give them on how they could break in and get their first job in blockchain?
Yeah, I think like, first of all, sort of break down blockchain into sort of which category of sort of this blockchain industry you want to work in, because like blockchain at this point is like a massive industry. Like there's, like the market cap is like 3.5 billion. Like there's so many different like areas. There's, I would say, a fairly big difference if you're working on, let's say, like you're building like a layer one, or you're working in DeFi, you're working in like, it's like NFTs or institutional stuff. Like it's a fair bit of like differences there. And so I would probably like find one area that's that you're maybe particularly interested in. And I think the first part is like actually understanding the space and understanding what's going on. I think it's if you have an understanding of the space and like the dynamics and actors and like how the protocols work and so forth. I think it's meaning. I think it's very helpful in terms of actually getting a job. And so I would say it's not necessarily a prerequisite. Some people do get jobs and then they learn on the job, but I do think it gives you a massive edge in the recruitment process, because it's also something which like people tend to be looking at themselves, because it's very helpful, especially let's say you're trying to join a startup. Like it's very helpful for us to like hire people that are like actually like interested in what we're building, because then they will like craft and like help like shape things in a way that makes sense, and like they're more like, let's say, personally like interested and motivated in that. So I'd say finding the pocket in crypto that's appealing to you and going deep into it. I think that helps a lot, and then you can like how I initially got started was just like helping out. Like I was like with the my last company I founded, like there initially I was just like I just helped them for free with a bunch of stuff, and I've been helping for free in like a few other projects as well. Because oftentimes you have like a Discord where there's like a community program and you can like do various things for the community. And oftentimes these organizations are like semi-open where there's like a lot of things in the periphery of the organization that need to get done. And so if you just are an active participant and like meaningfully contribute and like build relationships with the people in the team, I think that can also give you an edge in terms of then actually joining those teams. And I think in the process of doing so, you make connections, you like learn how the space works, how it operates. And so all of this, like what I'm saying, I think you can do like probably in your spare time with, let's say, a normal job. And then, yeah, I think you can like, then it's like applying for jobs. But I think just applying randomly for jobs without having any experience or any knowledge of crypto, I think is unlikely to be successful. Or I think you're much more likely to be successful if you started helping out in projects, and you could also show that, because then to any potential recruiter and so forth, they will see like, look, this person has contributed here and here. Like in the interview, they can like speak about their experiences and so forth. And I think it shows like initiative, it shows like interest, and I think that's super valuable. So um, to me, that's probably where we can start, like the learning and figuring out the right area, and contributing. Then from there, getting a job.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think you're completely right on the fact of like learning and even giving some of this stuff a go. Like it doesn't have to cost you that much money. You can spend $5 or €5, £5, whatever it is. You know, buying some kind of say you buy get some USDT or USDC, and then you can swap it into Bitcoin or Ethereum or something, or you can just have a play around with some of these DeFi protocols. For example, if you're looking to go into DeFi space, and actually just give it a go. You'd be surprised how many people I speak to who go, "Yeah, I really want to get into the industry." And I go, "All right, cool. Like, what stuff do you do on chain at the moment? Do you trade? Do you stake? Like, what do you do?" And they go, "Oh no, I wouldn't put my own money into it. It's far too risky." And you're like, do you really want to join the industry? Probably not.
Yeah,
Um, the amount of people that don't have a wallet, just don't have wallets, for example, they've never used MetaMask or all this kind of stuff. And to me, that's crazy. If you're actually trying to break into an industry, uh, you're gonna try and use the products, right? Like that's just common sense, I would
yeah,
have thought. But yeah, and then getting involved in the community, that can be quite. I think that can be quite difficult to do because there's so many
yeah,
projects and communities now. It is tough to to work out where you want to be, like what communities you want to join and what you want to be in. Because I guess it's very difficult to manage. Let's say you're looking for a role, you want to try and speak to as many projects as possible, right? So 30, 40, 50 projects you might try and speak to try and find a position or something. Trying to get involved in all those communities can be tough. Um, but I think to echo what you said, I think it is super important to build the relationships within the teams and things, because you never know who they're going to then intro you to or refer you to and that kind of thing. So space is ran on referrals and networking, from a jobs perspective. So I think, yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. Like getting involved in a few of the big communities, the projects that you really like the look of, get involved, chat to the team, chat to other people, and I think just over time, you'll be introduced to opportunities and roles and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah,
yeah,
and
it
I
can be
think a
quite
lot of this
difficult.
happens in yeah. I say like, a lot of this happens in Discords. I would say like kind of just you can join the Discords and then you can also find like which communities you kind of vibe with because every community has their own flavor and I'd say sometimes you just find one where it like resonates personally with you and I think there you will probably then be more successful in terms of like building those connections. But yeah, like on what you said with also trying different tools out, like I almost always ask this when like hiring someone is like kind of what their favorite tools are and what they're using. And if they're not using any of the tools, it's like a really big red flag. I find also personally like if I have like some amount of money involved in these protocols, um, it changes also my incentive to learn about them. Because once you have money on the line, you kind of like it's to me there's just no bigger motivator to actually start learning these things. So I do think it's like a really good recommendation to like put. I mean, it doesn't have to be like all your money. It can just be like something where it would like hurt to lose it. And then, like if that's $100 for you, or if it's $1,000 or whatever it is, like as long as it's like I think a little bit meaningful. I think it's helpful to just start off with like a few dollars, just test it. But then like I think if you really are trying to use the money in the protocols, it forces you to be like a smart participant. And I think by being a smart participant in the space, you really understand what's going on. And I think if you understand what's going on, I think it's much easier to then kind of get a job.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So if someone is already here, then they're working for Protocol, they're with their favorite project. How do you ensure that you can build a successful career? How do you make yourself indispensable to founders?
I think like one strategy, which is pretty common, is to build your own persona and like your own network. I think that's becomes quite valuable. So it's very valuable for the project as well, where most projects will like try to help you build out. Usually, this is on X or Twitter. Like most companies will like want you to have a persona there and like actively be like participating in conversations and like speaking about like kind of what you're working on, like the general area you're in, like having opinions and trying to like become a thought leader. I think once you have built a bit of an audience there, I think that can be like a really powerful platform. And I think it also becomes a powerful platform then in terms of like, you know, because that will like stick with you like from one job to another. Like, so you can use that as a sort of distribution point both for your own career and for the project. And then that makes you valuable. And the larger your distribution is, the more valuable that sort of tool becomes. And it gives you then connections to like, various other opportunities that are down the line, both personally and for the project. So I would say that's one that's really important. I think in general, like I think with all organizations, and I think this is not just unique to cryptos. Like if you're kind of delivering a lot of value, I think that in the end gets reflected in usually your like role and earnings. I think it's sort of a it's not like a one to one relationship where like the more value you deliver that always means you will like earn more and have a like higher role. But I think in general, like if you end up doing a lot of important work and you deliver a lot of things, people start relying on you more and more, and then because people are relying on you more and more, you come have a heavier weight in the organization, and that sort of lifts you up. And I think it also builds your reputation because like then in the future when people do reference check and so forth, like they'll see like, okay, this person is like really like someone good that you want on your team. So I think in general, just kind of doing as much as you can. And I think that's also one of the nice things with crypto is like you it's an environment where oftentimes there's like an infinite amount of work to be done. There's so many things that have to happen, and if you really want to grind, it's like I don't know if there's any better place to be than in crypto because there's just so much stuff you can do and you can move different things forward. And most of these organizations are also relatively immature, and you can help build out processes. You can help out sort of getting your organization to the next level. And I think in the process of doing so, you become indispensable. So I think that's I would recommend.
Yeah, no, really good recommendations. I think adding as much value as possible is key there. And you're right, like there's so much that you can get involved in. Like even if you're on the tech side, but you can write some cool blog posts. You can, as you said, like get your social media presence up and running. You can add value by raising awareness of the project. You can do that in any role as well. You know, if you're really into the project and you're writing cool stuff, and you're writing blog posts and tweets about it and LinkedIn posts, like all this kind of stuff. Like that's such an easy way to go above and beyond for the team. Um, but no, yeah, completely right. And then purely from a job hunting perspective, further down the line, one advice I always say to people, just to mirror what you said, is build your own network, because most roles, I would say, I don't know what the stat is in terms of a figure, but I'd say most roles in Web3 get filled through people's networks, referrals, this kind of thing. I'm sure a few get filled through job adverts and that kind of stuff, but we're not great in Web3 at getting our roles really visible to people in the market, and people don't like being that visible either. The team members and teams and projects are buried in Twitter, Discord, this kind of stuff. They're not out there applying for roles and that kind of thing. So I think if you take the time to build your own network, and again, this is also good for trying to break into the space as well, really. But yeah, just building your own network and your own presence online and that kind of thing can really, really help when it comes to getting roles now, but also future career development stuff. It's a bit of a life hack, I guess, for getting roles in Web3.
Yeah, I just to kind of like double click on that. I think the sort of network piece. I think especially in terms of hiring, I think it ends up being like really really important. And I think the reason for this is because I think in crypto you end up having fairly low level of trust when it comes to cold outreach and just people like applying that you don't know. And this is because there's such a high incentive for people to try to exploit you in different ways. And so as like a founder, you're constantly personally targeted by very sophisticated attacks. And this is like, it's a constant threat. And so this means you become quite like defensive when it comes to like cold outreach, and you pay usually a premium to people that come through references and that you actually know. Um, like in terms of recruitment, it's like there's constantly people from like North Korea that are trying to get into your team. There's like people trying to send you like CVs with like and the CV you can't download the files because the files could be uh, exploit your computer, and like everyone's trying to like get access to your funds, get access to your multi-sig and all these things. So you have to be like kind of paranoid to make it. And I think that's part of the background why I think this industry is really it's like a big village. Like you go to all the conferences and everything, and it's like it's the same people over and over again. And um, I think a lot of things here happen based on referral. And so yeah, I think the quality of your network therefore becomes like critically important.
Yeah, for sure. And even as a founder as well, if you're looking to try and raise money and that kind of stuff, I know a lot of VCs will not look at projects if they don't have some kind of referral into the VC from someone they trust, they know, a project they worked with, whatever it might be. It can be super difficult just to raise money without any network or any reputation, just like cold pitching, right? So I guess it even spreads out. That ethos kind of spreads across all areas of the industry.
Yeah,
But
totally.
so we briefly touched on it, and you mentioned at the start like how important it is and the lesson that you learned about hiring the right team. is there any advice, like say if someone is looking to hire the team, they're a first-time founder looking to build good team, looking to find the right people. Uh, how do you do it? How do you find the right talent? Any tips you can give?
I mean, I think a big part of the challenge is to know what you're actually looking for. And I would say like that's something that you have to kind of look at usually within, like both from personality perspective, defining your organizational like culture and figuring out what type of people you want to have in your team. Because I think that's like another like a really important angle to it. It's not just like competency. I think the soft skills and kind of how people are personally, the culture you're building, I think is also critically important. So I think that's one thing I think that's really useful to define. Then in particular for the role, like figuring out what the actual requirements are. And this is like not always very trivial. But yeah, and oftentimes as you go through the process, like if you haven't really thought this through, you end up like changing the requirements, and I think that like can throw off the recruitment process quite meaningfully. So I think having those things done right from the start is, I think, the building block. Then thereafter, like it depends on the role, the like how you're gonna like find someone for this role. Like if it's mainly someone that's more like community oriented, it might come more through, let's say, your community. If it's something that's more like, let's say, a CTO or something, you might, or some sort of like executive role, you might look more at. I'd say there like tends to be a better fit to use like recruiters. And then if it's something that's like somewhere in between, you can kind of go either way, like either trying to like I'd say with all the different roles we talked about before is I think the personal network is usually like where you start. So you start with like reaching out to through your network, and network of the people in your team. You can have like referral bonuses, things like that to help kind of amplify that in your network. But then like if you've exhausted that resource, then I think you could do like job ads, like certain roles you could use, for example, like LinkedIn or cryptocurrency jobs and Web3 jobs, etc. Like there's a few of these platforms that are decent. I would say I've had, had some success with those, but I would say most of it personally has probably been through personal network and recruiters, and then like that's probably I would say the personal network is maybe like half, and then recruiters maybe like 30%, and like 20% that's been through like ads and so forth, which is I'd say a big contrast to in previous. I don't know. I think maybe it's always like that to some extent, but I'd say in Web2 it tends to lean a little bit more towards like the traditional recruitment process where you have a job ad and you filter through people and kind of go through the process. As I That's probably slightly de-emphasized in my opinion in Web3 recruitment in favor of like network and recruiters.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. Yeah, there are definitely some roles that you never need to speak to a recruiter about. Realistically, some you should always be able to hire yourself. Like you should really only need to go to a recruiter when you're struggling to find someone directly through your own network, through the team's network. Because you're right, like that's a super powerful tool. If you can get that process running effectively where the team are reaching out to people, the team would know people through friends of friends and that kind of stuff. You can get referrals through that. As you said, you have your referral scheme and stuff in place for team members. I would imagine 90% of roles you could probably fill through that. There may be the odd position that is more difficult to find where you need someone who's like diving into the passive side of the market to really headhunt some talent from another project or something, right? Like more of the senior roles, like lead engineering roles or director of marketing stuff, or those types of positions. But no, yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah, it's useful to understand the difference, I guess, between the traditional recruitment and Web3. Um, I think there's a common theme here. We've spoken about it quite a lot, but building your network is everything, isn't it? Really, in Web3. Off the back of this conversation, I mean, it's clear it touches across every single part of your career as you go through the space. But
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely helpful. Like, I think it, yeah, I think from a career building perspective, I think it's incredibly helpful. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's always like difficult to find the time to like prioritize it. I think certain roles you end up doing it more than others, but yeah, I think it gives you an edge, and it's definitely yeah not possible to spend at least some time. It's like I think it doesn't have to be your main focus, but I think spending at least like 1 or 2 hours at least like per week, amplifying your network and like having a presence is quite useful.
yeah, for sure. Um, so Rob, I'd like to ask this question to everyone who joins the podcast, just to finish up. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for people listening?
Um, I think to me I think taking the like long arc of the career is probably something I try to think a lot about in terms of what I spend my time on and like where I'm involved. And it is to look at it from more of a long term perspective of what I'm doing now, like how that's building towards the future. I think in particular when you're looking at, for example, entering into Web3, like if you want to eventually have some sort of like executive role in that space, like, you know, the first thing you need to do is like really understand it well, and then you need to like kind of learn a lot in terms of like building a network, and then eventually I think you can get there. And so I think taking that like longer term like horizon into mind, I would say that to me that's super important. And for me, what that oftentimes comes down to is learning as much as possible is super valuable, and being thrown into situations where you're forced to learn a lot of things is very valuable. I think in the moment it can seem like oftentimes like difficult to do all these things that are new and novel and so forth. But I think taking on a lot of new things and like learning a lot of things, I think it pays off over time. And so to me, that's something I try to like op- optimize for learning. At least like I think early you want to optimize for learning, and then I think at a later stage you might have different priorities. But I think if you take the long term view, I think that becomes super important.
I like it. Yeah, well, thank you very much for the advice. Rob, really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you for taking the time out to talk us through your journey and yeah, share your advice on breaking into the space, building a career here. If anyone's listening and they have any extra questions, they want to find out more about you guys and what you guys are building, is Twitter the best place to find you? Is it LinkedIn? Like, where can people go to find out more?
Yeah, it was a really good conversation. To find me on X or Twitter, it's at
Yeah,
Cork Rob, and what we're building is Cork Protocol, so it's at Cork Protocol. So um, please follow us there, and you can stay up to date to Twitter.
great stuff. Well, yeah, Rob, thank you very much for taking the time to have a chat. Really enjoyed it. And I'll catch
Thank
up with you
you.
soon.
I guess. Take care. Thank you.